Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of MeidasTouch and Valor Media Networks. I'm Bobby Jones, and I have the honor and privilege today to be with retired Brigadier General Leela Gray, who is running for the United States Congress out of Florida District 13, if I'm not mistaken. And first of all, thank you for coming and joining us today, General.
My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure.
You served 27 years, and we sometimes joke those are dog years if you have the uniform on. You served a long time. You've done more than your fair share for this country, obviously, your family. So why are you doing this now? Why are you running for Congress? That seems like a heck of a way to fail retirement.
Oh, I failed it a few times already because I retired back in 2018. Mm-hmm. There wasn't one seminal moment. So, I mentioned I retired in 2018. And oh, by the way, I actually ended up doing 30 years. And because I retired out of U.S. Army Central, so the things that are going on in Iran are very close to me. I retired out of U.S. Army Central as the Deputy Commanding General for Mobilization and Reserve Affairs. And if you know some of the, know the background of some of the service members that have been killed since we've gone into Iran or gone to war with Iran, those are reserve soldiers and airmen, actually. And so there wasn't a seminal moment for me. Since I retired, I've been serving on some private sector boards and nonprofit boards, including the Gary Sinise Foundation. I kind of joke about failing at retirement, I decided to go to law school as well. And so just a few years ago in 21, I decided to go to law school. It'd been a childhood dream of mine. Mm-hmm. But I really wanted to understand, we raised our hand to defend the Constitution. What does that really mean? And what was the history behind that? So for me, going to law school answered a lot of questions that I didn't really explore or learn about in my military career. And while I was at law school, I discovered veterans law. And so that's what kept me in law school. I discovered an opportunity to fight for our veterans at the benefits level and in the court system. And so fast forward, I did that for about 2.5 years doing veteran advocacy work, graduated in December 24, took the Florida bar exam in February of 25, got my results in April of 25, took a long, deep breath after that because I'd been in school for 3.5 years plus studying for the bar exam and was all set to actually take my first case the following January because you have to apply to get VA accreditation and we had a shutdown. Everything was on hold. And then I also applied to the Court of Appeals for veterans claims because you have to have a license and then you get admitted to the federal appellate court level. Did all that and was all set to take my first case in January. And just something happened in December. It was this overwhelming feeling of after watching all the things that occurred in 2025, the purging of the military, the abuse of power, the abuse of misuse of justice, the degradation in ignoring the Constitution. I just felt compelled. I felt, I've never really in my heart stopped serving. I'm serving my community, serving my family, serving my potential clients, serving veterans. And I said, I can do something about this. I need to do something about that. Honestly, Bobby, I never planned on being in politics in my life. We all probably know why. For all the reasons that we all decide not to go into politics. But honestly, I felt it was too important, that the time was too important. And I know that you already know this, but there's never been a female general that has run for Congress. And there's never been a female admiral that has run for Congress. And now there's 3 of us. And to me, that is the sign of the times right there.
I cannot agree with you more. That call that you heard to sign up, to put on the uniform, it doesn't really go away. You want to ignore it, but you can't. And you mentioned your operational background. With everything going on, particularly in the Middle East, as someone who understands that, logistics is how you win wars, When you see what's happening in Iran, when you hear the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, say we won the war and President Trump saying this, but all of our bases are bombed out, what are you thinking immediately when you see these reports?
I'm very skeptical. You know, the information flow has been disrupted that we would normally receive as the American people. I also have a long background in Army public affairs and defense public affairs. And so as somebody that spent about 15 years in public affairs, we worked really hard to connect the American people with the service member by telling them the truth as quickly as possible. I remember studying that in 1991, and I went in 1988, so I was still part of this, but I was a finance officer when I initially went in the Army. It's what I got commissioned as. And I remember studying about the fact that we had our first press polls in 1991 because we learned the lessons from all the time before about building trust with the American people. And you do that through truth and honesty and doing things in a forthright manner, right? By being proactive about that. And so the combination of limited information coming out, plus no embedded media, which if you remember back to Iraq, it didn't matter if you were Navy or Army or Marine Corps. I mean, we had embedded media everywhere, and it was a deliberate process. It was on purpose to keep the American people informed. So not only have we not embedded media, but now we've pushed the media out of the Pentagon. So I've worked with the Pentagon press pool before, and it was very disheartening to read some of the things that were going on. And so it makes me very skeptical about what I hear from them, both almost anything they want to share. The other is, of course, having been on the ground there.
Right.
So in my role as DCG, Deputy Commanding General for U.S. Army Central, I did 11 trips in 18 months to the Middle East to visit troops there, to talk with troops, to understand their mission, to understand the training they received to prepare for that mission, to understand the equipment and the logistics that they received to be prepared to execute that mission. And I learned a lot on the ground there, even though, of course, I had spent decades in the Army already. But really, it's always about boots on the ground, knowing the ground truth, so to speak. So I learned a lot about the units there. In fact, many of those places that have been attacked by Iran, including the one where the soldiers were killed at Port Shueba, I've been in those facilities. I've walked that ground. And so it's almost kind of personal to me in that we didn't do the right things to protect our service members, knowing full well we were going into a war scenario. And let me also back that up for the fact that I spent 2 different tours at U.S. Central Command. Okay. So not only have I spent time on the ground, but a few years before that, we had exercises specifically around Iran. And my first one was under General Mattis. So we all know how impressive a senior leader General Mattis is. And I had an opportunity, the privilege to see that firsthand, to work side by side with him and to run those exercises and to be part of that. And so it's very disconcerting to me to see the way we're prosecuting this. I can imagine on the receiving end of a service member or particularly a leader, this on again, off again, on again, off again. You know, it's got to be difficult to be fully prepared. I mean, to stay on alert for a long period of time, as you probably are well aware, is really draining. The other thing I think about, particularly because of, the Navy and the Army, we have different tour time frames, right, for deployments forward. Often the Army is 12 months boots on the ground, and the Navy historically, correct me, at least in recent years, has been about 9 months. But we see that when we don't have the full plan laid out, that gets extended, or, and so being able to be back with your family is really important. It's important to the families. It's important to the communities. It's important to those service members. And so that's got to be really difficult when you don't have that type of ability to plan. I mean, no war operates, like perfectly to a plan, but being as prepared as you can and having the foresight to understand the implications of not delivering a plan that is viable, that's mature, experienced leadership actually does.
You nailed it on the head, the deployments. And then when you get that notification you've been extended, whew, it's rough. It's rough. Let me pivot just a little bit, but stay in the same vein. We've seen a lot of in my humble opinion, very high quality flag officers be shown the door since Pete Hegseth has become Secretary of Defense. I mean, the definition, in my opinion, of real leadership across the spectrum. But it seems as though certain groups have been targeted, minority groups, and especially women. As someone who was able to get through that ceiling and put on a star, what are your thoughts for what you're seeing at the upper echelons of command?
I think this scenario and this process is extremely disappointing. Even when I pinned on general officer, brigadier general in 2015, we were only 6% of the population as women. Mm-hmm. And I saw that rise. I actually saw that rise. I retired in 2018, halfway through the first Trump administration. And, went on with my life, but I watched what was going on, and we had opened up combat operation positions in 2015 as well, early that year, to make that, to cast that net as far and wide for those that are capable, to let them go through and not to be discriminated based on their gender. And what I sense now is not only have we depleted some incredible talent that then gets to lead the next generation. I'm very much concerned about the message it sends, that you're not good enough to be able to achieve something, or that the fact that because you weren't in favor or you're not of favored status, you're not good enough to be able to achieve what you sought to achieve. And you've earned it. Like these are not situations where people were elevated to be able to receive those ranks. They earned it every step of the way. And I know because I've watched it myself. And I was so incredibly proud when I was at U.S. Army Central, because we were a very diverse general officer leadership. General Mike Garrett, he was a 3-star at the time, was our senior commander, our commanding general, who then went on to pin on his 4-star and command Forces Command. What an incredible, leader and incredible human. And we had a very diverse senior leader staff. And it was the epitome of having all sort of different types of thinking. And I really learned a lot from watching him as a senior leader. And so when I see those things that are occurring without any type of due process, without any reasons, there's a reason when you remove senior leaders from something, right? There's an investigation. Something happened. You do the proper process. If something happens, you do an investigation, you adjudicate the investigation, and then you proceed. But in this case, it seems very, just obviously based on gender or color of your skin or ethnicity. And I want to tell you a personal story. So last year, and I want to keep it as broad as possible because I don't want to reveal, I don't want to invade anybody's privacy. But there's 2 people that were removed last year that I personally knew. And one was a woman, and I happened to be actually in the same room with her when she got a text that she was fired. And they didn't say fired, but in essence, she was fired, right? It was earlier in the year. She received a text that she was retired. And then the other was later in this last year in the summer, I had an also personal friend who was also, we had actually been in their house on a Wednesday, and we were visiting them. And then on Friday, they were summarily removed for, again, 0 reasons. And it went outside the chain of command. This was a 2-star
really?
That the 4-star command didn't know anything about it. And so it's egregious. And I want to caution people to not, to not give up hope that we can right the ship. This is for you, Bobby, right the ship. But I am concerned, and I think we have to do something. And that has a lot to do with why I'm standing up and running for office, because we have to have people that understand the process and won't allow this just this random getting rid of people because it doesn't meet their criteria of who they look like or who they think will be more loyal.
Right. Wow. I got to process what you just said there. You wouldn't do that to an E3, firing them by text, let alone in 07, 08, 09. Wow. That really irks me. But let's pivot locally.
Highly unprofessional. Highly
unbelievable. It's just it's unbelievable to me to hear that. Pivoting locally, you're in Florida. Florida has long been almost like a barometer for the rest of the nation in so many ways. Historically, you're in a very interesting congressional district, and the incumbent is very interesting too. I'll let you talk about it if you want to, but District 13, very unique. Can you tell me, what are people talking about? What are their concerns? What are they talking about around the kitchen table that has really caught your attention?
I don't think you're going to be surprised. It's so interesting because I'll have people ask me, well, where do you stand? Like, I don't know a lot about where you stand on things. And I go, ask me a question. And what I find is it's aligned with what most people are thinking and feeling. And I ask them what's important to them all the time. Number one is, what I call the cost of living crisis. It is not affordability. This is a crisis for many, many people. I mean, my district is fascinating, quite frankly. So this district has flipped around, and it's also been gerrymandered a few times. But by and large, our district, actually, we skew heavy veterans, something upwards of 100,000 veterans here. It could be more. There's not a great tracker because, that's one of those self-identified measurements. The other is we skew 50 plus and older. So when you think about that group of that age demographic, people are generally at the latter part of their career. But if they're under financial stress, that means retirement is even farther off for them. And they may be taking care of children, high schoolers. Plus, I've also seen where kids that have graduated high school, but they can't afford to live on their own because they didn't decide to go to college. It wasn't right for them. And so they're working, but they can't afford to live on their own at the age of 19, 20, 21, 22. And then they're caring for their elderly parents too. So that squeeze is so hard. And then you have to think about where we are in the country as far as locality, right? Geography. We are a coastal economy. We have miles and miles of beaches. We got hit really hard. You saw all the pictures with Hurricane Helene. In particular, I was living on Treasure Island during Hurricane Helene, actually. Oh, wow. My husband and I stayed. We were fortunate. We were in a 3-story townhome, so we only lost everything on the lower level. 3 feet of water came in the house, but we had an 8-foot surge that came up off the beach into all the barrier islands. So Treasure Island's one of the little barrier islands. Like you have Clearwater and all these beach communities all the way down to St. Pete Beach. So hit very hard. And then on top of that, 2 weeks later, we got hit with Hurricane Milton. So recovery, bringing up power, water, and then bam, we got hit again. And a lot of people remember the horrific effects of Hurricane Helene in Asheville, North Carolina, right? We all saw the massive flooding and loss of life and property. But so this community is still rebuilding from Helene. It's almost 2 years now. And the woman, the current congressional member voted against FEMA before Hurricane Helene slammed into our coastline. I think we had 11 or 12 people that lost their lives. I've lost count of the amount of billions of dollars in property loss. And I think that what we're seeing in this district in particular we have 30% independents, 40% Republicans, and 30% Democrats. And I'm hearing from independents and Republicans that want change, that they're not getting this, being properly represented. Their story, their issues are not being represented. This cost of living crisis, because of all the things I just talked to you about, and it has been going up for decades, is our cost of insurances. We have property insurance, flood insurance, and car insurance. People aren't even talking about that, but I don't know if you've looked, and I know you probably have USAA as well, but even mine has gone up 20, 30% per year over the last several years. And I even tried to call them and say, explain this to me, and didn't get a really great answer. But we have to tackle this cost of living crisis. So, we got hit with a hurricane. We have our insurances are sky high in this part of the country. And then we also have the issues of the tariffs slamming our small businesses. So the other thing that most people don't know about this district, and it's fascinating, is Pinellas County is one of the highest concentrations of small business in America. Like 30,000 small businesses are here. And when I talk about a coastal economy, we're talking it's tourism is one of our main 70% of our economic driver here. When all those and if those businesses are devastated because of the hurricanes, if they're close to the coastline, the smaller businesses inland are also going to feel that impact. So the tariffs really hit small businesses hard. The hurricanes hit small businesses hard. So we're really, really experiencing that kind of really crush. Now, I will also offer on the one other area that people aren't, you're probably hearing this too, because I think we do as military, is that people are genuinely concerned about our democracy. They're genuinely concerned about the violations of the rule of law. They're genuinely concerned about the Department of Justice being weaponized. And though all of that responsibility, taxes, spending, and oversight is Congress's job. They have completely abdicated their responsibility. And we have to have leaders that understand what the job actually means. It's in the title, representative. You're representing the people. You're representing them to, in Congress in their best interests. And that has just fallen by the wayside. And I would say, we didn't get here overnight, right? We didn't get to where we are in America overnight, or even in the last 2 years. We've got issues on both sides, on all sides of the aisle. And we really need to get back on what the purpose that we as a congressional member are really there for. And that is to make sure that this country is running well and we're doing the best that we can for the people and not ourselves. It's really service over self.
I think that is the best way to put it and to end it, because it's about selflessness, and you've done it for decades. It is obvious we need more of you. I cannot think of a starker contrast in personality and mission when it comes to congressional races than what you're going through in District 13. I mean, it is, the Grand Canyon opposite of the choice that those people have to make down there. And I hope and I pray that they make the right one. General, I cannot thank you, first of all, enough for your service. Secondly, for you willing to continue to serve. And thirdly, picking an Annapolis man to marry. This is what we call the trifecta. So thank you so very much. Thank you so very much, and good luck and best of luck to you and your campaign. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bobby. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.